Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Drawing Down the Stars. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined today by my good friends Ryan Seven and Dion. How's it going, guys?
Life is very yellow today, very sunny and bright.
Actually, mine's a Wu-Tang. So,
Oh, wow. Ridiculous.
Killer bees, killer bees.
sunny with a touch of violence.
Right? It's that solar Lucifer energy today, right? We have the full moon in Capricorn. So happy full moon, guys. Happy full moon chat. This is going to be a wild time. Tonight, or this afternoon, sorry, we're talking about whips. And we're talking about the mastics. This idea, this image of power, persuasion, of plague, of drugs. It gets kind of wild. Dion, you made a whole presentation for us. Ryan, what are your thoughts on whips from like an occult perspective before we get into everything?
I mean, knowing nothing, this is why I was quite happy to come on this time. It's like normally, it's like, oh, I've got so much to give. And this time it's like, I know lots about whips from a historical and martial context, but very little on the occult side. However, I can take a crack at it.
Ooh, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So yeah, a whip's very much like a goad, isn't it? It's either a punishment or a kind of a negative carrot on a stick, as it were. It's to get somebody to do something that they don't want to do. Also, you've got to think in the West, the most obvious whippings are that of Jesus when he's on that pillar getting whipped. But then we've got pillar symbolism now, which is very phallic and very pole and very you've got to take your whips, haven't you? Life kind of has a series of lashes attached to it. So, you know, we've all got to bear that whip. We've all got to wear these scars, and that's life. And if you've not got those scars and if you've not been whipped, you probably aren't living your life. However, who's got a hold of the whip? Who let the cat out the bag?
This is going to get so fun and get so interesting. Before Dion takes over and starts his presentation, and then I'll have a presentation of sources that we'll dig into at the end. I just want to set it up with this idea of Helios and Apollo, the chariot driver, right? Who wields the whip and holds the reins. And this is really heavy symbolism we see from the earliest Greek to the latest Greek. And it's this idea that we are the horses that drive the chariot of Helios, and he forces us to pull them, utilizing either the reins or the whip. He has two options at his disposal. But also you see the reverse of this. It's not just something used by Helios Apollo. It's also Aphrodite. Aphrodite has a daughter with Prometheus, Pytho, the daimon of persuasion. And she is also called her whip of persuasion. And you'll often see her up like this, wielding the whip. And Hermes, he said, we'll get into this in my presentation, but he battles Apollo and gains the whip of persuasion from Apollo. And that's where his magic comes from. So there's a lot to be said here with this imagery of the sun, this solar cult, Aphrodite and Apollo, and this whip. And also in the Orphic, you see it with Eros. But we'll get into that later. What about you, Dion?
Go for it, Ryan.
Yeah, before that, even there's one up from that solar. We've got Abraxas as well, the cock-headed god. That sounds terrible. The rooster-headed god. He's like this this figure that is above. You could think there's a good god and a bad god, and he's the one that kind of brings them both together. He's the one above it. He's the actual. He's almost like incarnation itself and the universe and reality. Because we're alive, because we live in this universe, we have to breathe, we have to eat, we have to have sex, we're driven by all these urges. Well, Abraxas is the one above the good and the good and the bad god. He's like almost the originator of reality, and he's making us do this. He's making us breathe. He's making us have to go to the toilet, which is never a particularly pleasant event to go through. He's making us have to live, so we have to die. He's got the whip, and that whip is life itself.
Exactly. In the Orphic, you see this with the parallel is Phanes, right? Who's the divine android giant, but also part animal, right? And in the story, Phanes is driven mad by the god Eros, right? By Eros. And the wings of Eros are said to cause him to rip himself apart, right? In frustration. And that becomes the descent unto creation. And you'll see this also with, there's so many parallels. Zagreus in the spinning top. Zagreus becomes distracted by the spinning top, and this top is set into motion by the whip, right? And then Zagreus falls to creation. Or Gallus, right? Gallus Attis, right? He notices the Pytho, this divine nymph, and then castrates himself in madness. There's this, it's all about this idea that the whip is the force that drives creation, right? That causes movement, that sets things into motion. The kinu in the Greek.
There's a simple word for it. Will. It's the will.
The will.
Yeah.
The will.
Yeah.
I know Dion's like, have I got a presentation for you?
Oh, no.
Come on, Dion.
Y'all set
Lay it on, bro.
Y'all set the stage because you named a lot of the characters in the story. So first picture, please.
All right, let's get started here. Okay.
And this sets the stage. Will to power. Something has to get done. And here's Jesus in the temple, the moneylenders. And to enforce, he fashioned a whip out of rope, out of cords. It's a homemade whip at that. We can unpack this picture, astrotheology. We could look at the animals and say, well, these animals are representative of constellations in the sky. We could unpack it by color symbology, which is psychoactive dyes, and say, hey, well, those fabrics they're wearing represent different psychoactive plants in nature that they could take through dye extracts. We could say, here's political. This is over politics. This deals with different factions making money and controlling people and taxing people for different services. Because the animals are part of services. And these services could be ritualistic, which could be the temple of Aphrodite. In the Bible, the regular version, Emmanuel, Jesus, gets mad because of the animals. They're selling and exchanging money in the temple, but other people have posited this is really about Aphrodite's temple, and the doves deal with Aphrodite. It even goes back to earlier in the Bible when his parents, Joseph and Mary, bring doves to the temple to be sacrificed to Aphrodite's temple, because that's what you do with the doves there. As well as we talked about in the other episodes about the dove's milk, which could be psychoactive, the milk they could excrete. But
from the crop.
Yep, the crop. Well, what's funny, other animals will chew the food and digest it and spit it, but doves excrete it as a form of milk, and it can break down psychoactives, including cannabis or poppies, stuff like that. So let's see if we can find this in Aphrodite. You said Aphrodite there. There are versions of Aphrodites with the whip, because if this is a temple of Aphrodite, I'm positing, let's go to the next pic.
Before we hop on, I also want to point out that part of the reason why there's this fight here is the gambling, right? It's not just that they're doing business, they're gambling. And also there's, and when Ammon has broken this down, he talks about the temple of Aphrodite, they do prostitution, right? The doves are there to be prostituted, and this is a holy sacred act, but this is completely anathema to the patriarchal cult that Jesus here represents, right?
Love it. Temple of Aphrodite. Here's another version right here. We were talking about a story where somebody gets whipped. hang on 1 second. I'm going to have to shut off something outside. My roommate is here. Let me let him in.
Oh, right. No worries. Yeah, this stuff with Aphrodite is wild because you will see so many references to her with the whip. And I have one that comes up that's really important. But one of the more famous ones is in the story of Jason and Medea, where Jason is able to convince Aphrodite to give him the whip of persuasion, which he uses upon Medea, which drives Medea mad and leads to the entirety of the story. It allows him to gain access to the great song through the golden fleece, right?
So
and that comes direct from Aphrodite. What, sorry?
Is that the original telling of the story, or is that the play that was written later on?
That one, I believe that one comes from the play that's written later on. That's from the Argonautica, right? Where they actually use that phrase, the whip of persuasion. But you will see there are examples. There's even in Pindar's odes, they describe her as holding the whip. You'll see images too of Aphrodite with this whip. It's a common motif. It's not as common as with Apollo Helios, but it is associated with her. And it's also associated with Hermes, and her and Hermes are really important together, right? Because together they become hermaphroditus, and they're kind of the twinning there.
What do you see that as? Do you see that as, what if you break that metaphor down? Is that kind of pull that women have over men that make them do everything? What do you think that is?
Well, there's a dual metaphor going on here between the whip and the reins, and when to use the whip and how to use the reins. It becomes really complicated, and I'm not sure. We'll break it down when we get to my part of the of the presentation. But what do you think, Dion, of this stuff?
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries.
A lot of stuff going outside. Every time on Sunday we have the gardeners show up. We've had different episodes. They start with the blowers and the cutters, and I had to tell them to stop for a second. But arrows are at Psyche, Aphrodite and Psyche. I don't know if you're familiar with Psyche getting whipped. It deals with she's pretty. Aphrodite gets jealous. Has her whipped by worry and sorrow.
Yeah, the Furies. So the Furies also have the whips, right? And these are children of Aphrodite. Yeah.
And so at a certain point, Zeus takes pity on her and gives her ambrosia and tells Aphrodite, hey, you can't whip her no more. But the whip is part of the punishment she has to go through to get the ambrosia as part of the metaphor.
Zeus also has the whip, and he uses it to punish and torture Hera. There's a famous passage, I believe it's the Odyssey, where he talks about, remember when I hung you upside down and I whipped you silly? That's what will happen again if you defy me. It's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. So with ambrosia and whipping, part of it in the previous episodes, we talked about ambrosia as an amarita. It's a nectar, something that you concoct. We've talked about the fool, which is a milk, or the satire, and these sound like comical things, but these are dishes in ancient times that involve cream, the whipping of cream, and a whisk. And so besides the whip, we have something that's called the whisk. And even the word kukion means to stir, to whisk, and that's part of it. And you can see what they're holding up there is it's twigs or branches, and it's part of it's a cooking technique to whisk something, to stir, to concoct, to build oysters is part of the technique. Go to the next
create foam, right? You're creating foam
to aerate. There's a birch one right there, which is a whisk or a whip, and it's part of the kykeon. You have to mix it to get it to activate. And we've talked about dairy as lactonosis in other episodes. That dairy, the animals that dairy animals can bioprocess entheogens that are dangerous to us or that are not available to us, the alkaloids or the psychoactive properties. And through their excretions, their saliva, their milk, their urine, or even eating the animal or their blood, you can get the psychoactive properties. Let's hit the next pic. And so right here is something that's called the barsum in Zoroastrianism. And it's a whisk. It's like a whip. You can go to the next pic, and you can see, all right there. That's a picture of Zoroastrianism in one of the temples. It's basically like milkshakes. It's like they have milk and water and herbs and little pressing things to press the herbs into juices. And people will talk about it's a homa ritual, homa or soma. And notice each one of the priests, their hand is on that little whisk. The thing I showed you in the previous picture. And it's that little whisk is a big part of the property for creating the homa ritual, or the kaikion. It's in the whipping motion that aerates or activates the psychoactive milks. Like, go to the next pic. All right, here's a
lot of the time when you're whipping stuff up as well. There's like the reason why I think like milk whips, for example, is all the proteins get linked together in a certain direction, and it gives it that body. So you can imagine there's actual chemical. Just that action would be a chemical reaction. It's a catalyst.
Exactly.
It's a literal physical catalyst. Exactly.
And so, besides whipping, here's an older picture going back to the Assyrian temples, Temple of Ashur, and you get into the Sumerian stuff, Enki and Enlil and all that kind of stuff. So, in one of these pictures, a tree of life, you can see there's also a goat up in the corner. Because that's part of it. The milk is part of the rituals, and the goats are part of the rituals. And now go to the next pic. All right, so here's at the Temple of Ashur, and this is the god Ashur. Now, he's holding these two plant things that are representative of the tree of life, or their psychoactive plant. He's feeding it to the goats. The goats are eating it. Down in the bottom corner, these water goddesses are holding whips. And so it's part of an ancient iconography using whips and goats and milk and oysters and psychoactive plants and gods. It's all the symbols come together. And so, yeah, let's hit the next pic. All right. So whipping goats and oysters, tragedy, trogos. That's a goat song. Anybody want to talk about this picture in ancient Greece? Unpack that?
No. It's too rude. I mean, look at Hermes there in the background. He poke himself in the eye. Yeah.
You also got to remember those statues, those herms, they would be literally everywhere around Greece. They would mark every crossroad, right? But yeah, so the satyr, right, chasing the maenad, and then the maenad whipping the satyr off her, right? This is part of the orgies that would be held during the fertility rites, and the drugs are what turn the men into satyrs that give them these erections that would last for days and days and days. Yeah, just absolute wildness, and it's about, again, invoking that frenzy, bringing the mania, right, in order to see the future, in order to go through these rites of purgation. And part of the purgation is the orgy, right?
Yeah. Well, the actual, what's really going on is symbolized by that herm. Most herms are like a pillar with a little head on the top, and normally a little willy on the bottom. It's not that big normally. You'd imagine if that was real in stone, it would break off too easily. It's not kosher for engineering purposes. However, what that is, and that symbol still carries on to the Masons now, and that is they have this pillar or a stone, and it's a rough stone, and you are supposed to kind of carve that stone out until you make something of it. Well, how do you carve? What makes you want to carve that good person from this rough person? Well, it's your willpower. It's that whip again, but also will and the willy, and we all know willies have a mind of their own and get you to do things that you don't normally do if it didn't have its own little dose of willpower about it. Well, that's the same with the herm. You're using that sexual force, that willpower, or even the will to overcome that sex, or in this case, that purgation to allow all that Pan, the goat-headed figure, he's your wild side, and it needs to come out. You can't just subjugate it. You need to let it out sometimes. Well, through this purge or through the reigning of that force, you carve out this stone. And the reason why herms are on those are at crossroads is because you got a decision to make at the crossroads. You can either take the easy route or the difficult route. You can either go and make it, use that willpower upon yourself and flail yourself and go the difficult way, which ends in a good place, or you can go the easy way that ends in a difficult place. This is life. And there's the technique to carve yourself out of this rough pillar, this herm.
But we have to be careful too, right? You'll see this is a lot of image. I've been rereading Salome, for example. And part of the thing with Salome is you'll have, right? Salome embodies in that play, in the Oscar Wilde story, she embodies Lady Babylon. And she freaks out and challenges Joachim, who is John the Baptist. And basically is like, you were trying to be virginal and pure as the moon. Well, I am going to break you, And it's, there is a time and a place when you need to come together. That unity, that sexual power, that lust in love of nature must be expressed, and it must come out. If it isn't expressed, then it'll come out in far darker, more horrific ways than the Seder, it'll lead to something much, much worse, right? And this is kind of the story there, right? When you have these two powers, this feminine and this masculine, that are opposed to each other, it winds up with death and murder and destruction. And
the unity of that is the alchemical operation. And we were talking about Abraxas before. Jung uses that Abraxian figure as how to have those two things work well together. That, as Snappy said, you need to let it out. You need to let it out, but also you need to keep it in. It's this dichotomy, and it's difficult. And who's got the whip?
Right. Who's got the whip? It's all about trying to keep things in balance and to be careful, right? We just got to make sure that we are able to move and flow and be able to, it's dote and antidote. This is always the message, and part of the problem that we see with a lot of these monotheistic or monistic religions is that they want to restrict and bind you entirely, right? They want to turn love into sin in order to control. And then this causes far, far, far more problems. It leads to extremes of violence, right? There's a reason why the most conservative places have the most sexual violence,
Wow. What is that at the bottom of the herm? I can't quite see it. It looks like the thing that the herm's stuck in. It looks like a body, doesn't it?
It does look like a body. Do you have any idea, Dion, what's happening on the far right beneath the herm there? Are those bodies or are those stones?
It looks like a body to me.
Wow.
And that's a weird part of the herms. And another thing that we'll get into a little later is the zoanons, these carved pillars. But this picture was to set us up for Lupercalia, of the Lupercalia festival, where young boys chasing around and whipping women with goat thongs. You want to hit the next pick.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Tell us about Lupercalia, because I know y'all know about that one.
Well, it has to do with the fertility rites again, right? And you're having to do again with these, to do with the mother goddess with Ceres, and also the birth and the founding of Rome. This is ancient stuff that's coming because Rome, you have the merging of two different cultures, right? You have the Latin that's merging with the earlier Etruscan. And so that you have this kind of dichotomy that's coming out. And this is a holdover from this earlier wildness. And it is about these fertility rites. It's about this letting loose, about bringing out that kind of that wild fury, about the chase and the hunt,
Yeah. And deal the coming of age rituals, for, like you said, fertility rituals every year, spring, seasons change.
It's a lot more playful than you think, that they're not going out to hurt anyone, right?
Yeah, the idea is to generate oysters. Because when we talk about whipping, we haven't talked about, the basic aspect of animal husbandry and what the whip is used for. It's called pain compliance. And that's to make an animal do something you want it to do, keep the flock going this way. And so that's what the whip was generally used for. But it could be used also in a sexual way, where our nerve endings, if we're in a pleasure state, the whip feels good. And then there's other things going on in terms of the whipping, which we'll get more into. So Lupercalia, that's one festival. That's an example. We talked about the Aphrodite temple whipping festivals that deal with different gods, different rituals. Go to the next.
It's a very common thing too, where you get these people who flagellate themselves, flagellation, right? And then bleeding, right? You got to remember that entering into these ecstatic states, you need to push yourself through experience, whether it's pain or pleasure is relevant, or drugs, right? It's about pushing yourself to the extremes, you know, and oftentimes violence is a really easy way to get there.
Well, don't forget all the hormones that your body pumps out. You know, there are things to stop that pain once you've been feeling that pain for a while. There's also that kind of wind of sudden ecstasy you get when you get that rush of adrenaline too. Whoa, you get, you know, it excites you, it brings you on. It's like a big deep breath and if a dog walks by you and scares you, you're like, whoa, it's the same.
Also, you were talking about it too, right? With the power of Hermes. Hermes is the one who has the mastery of will, the mastery of self. This includes the mastery of the body. It's a very common thing you'll see with mystics and yogis, where they will destroy the body as a show of triumph of the will over reality, right? Like you'll see the yogis who stand there and let their legs and arms rot away. Or you'll see, right? This is a common thing, you know, or you see people who whip themselves or who will pull things with the flesh, or it's all about proving your mastery of will, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. So you might have saw the title of the video. Another word I can mess up, Diamastigosis. A ritual going back to Spartan times. Here's one. It's hard to find any pictures of ancient Spartan rituals that involved young boys getting whipped, but it's a famous ritual. You could read about it, and it involved, in front of the temple of Artemis, was cheese. And we've talked about cheese could be psychoactive, especially cheese, because first the milk is psychoactive. Well, let's ferment it even better and activate the properties with other ingredients. It's like a compounded cheese, a spiced cheese, you could call it. So the way this ritual worked was boys that were coming of age would try to get cheese in front of the temple that was laid out on a table that was protected by older boys that had whips. And they would come up and get whipped. And they would make no sounds, no crying. It was about, and there was honor. That was the whole thing. And at the end of the day, the boy who got the most cheeses would get his name. He'd be famous, and people would talk about him in plays and poems, and he would have a special clout in the city. He could walk around and they know that you're the one who felt no pain that could steal all the psychoactive cheeses in front of the temple of Artemis. And it's a special kind of Artemis. It's Artemis orthia. Artemis with wings. It's a certain type of Artemis. And here in this picture, they're whipping a young boy, and she's holding up an effigy of Artemis. That's a Zoanon. It's a flat statue. It doesn't have arms. Has no arms. It's straight. It's like a column. That pillar we're talking about. Yeah, it's like a herm. And this is the one to Artemis. And this is part of the effigy. They would train the young boys in front of them, and the young boys can make no sound. And you're talking about the marks and scars, those were badge of honor. Even like the fencing scars. People that go to the fencing.
This reminds me when you were talking, showing us those German mystery schools and the universities when they're doing those fencing rites.
Yeah, if you don't got a fencing scar, you don't even got clout. You're like, you know, that's how it works. So in this festival, or this ritual, it's when boys come of age, they get whipped trying to get the psychoactive cheese in front of Artemis Orthia, which is the winged Artemis. So go to the next picture. And remember, it'd probably be goat cheese. And so here's another Zoonon, our version of Artemis. And people could relate this to also Artemis of Ephesus. People will say those are beehives, bull balls,
bee eggs,
lactating breasts. I'll posit it could be something else. Those could be cheese curds of psychoactive cheese as well. Why not? And so there's a lot of different stuff to unpack with these statues. And also the fact that it could be a black goddess, a black Madonna, that goes back to, what is that, meteorites and these black stones from outer space.
So I got to talk to Dr. Carla Ionescu, and she's writing a whole book on this specific image of Artemis at Ephesus. And she insists that these are queen bee eggs. And her reasoning for saying that they're queen bee eggs is because, number one, there were bee production at the temple. The priests, the male priests, are called the drones of Artemis, the worker bees of Artemis. If they were breasts, they would be black. Always when you see this image, the skin is always black, right? And they are never referred to as bees in the early Greek literature. It's only in the later never referred to, as breasts in the early Greek literature. They only become breasts in the later Latin. So,
and think about that. That was the title we started off with, which is Artemis or Thea, which is the winged Artemis. And why would she have wings unless she's a queen bee?
Right.
And also the honey is psychoactive. We talk about rhododendron honeys in Turkey, especially, and if this is Ephesus, right there is where they get the psychoactive bees honey, the mad honey. And also you can preserve other psychoactives in honey.
Yeah. And you see a lot of bee deities linked to shamanism going all the way back to the first images that we ever see. In fact, the first mushroom image, the first like shamanic mushroom image is like a bee wasp deity. Look, it's got a kind of waspish face, but I think that's getting at the stinger, and they were a little confused what was going on between it being a bite and a sting. But it's literally covered all the way around it in mushrooms. So the whole psychoactive thing. And don't forget, is it Glaucus, the child of the Minotaur, who's a grey god? I think his name even means grey. And he turns blue, and he must be preserved in honey in the story.
Right. Yeah, I know what you're yeah.
Shiva's blue throat. Love it.
Right. Gosh. Shiva and the blue throat too, right? Which comes from the poison, right? And then he has to transmute the poison. All right.
Yep. Oh, there's an Artemis or Thea right there, the winged Artemis. And also, the gadfly, the oestrus, has connections to the hornet. And as part of the dance, it does. When the gadfly gets excited, it goes in a circle.
They look similar as well. European hornets and gadflies look the horseflies we call them in Britain, but they look very similar, and they feel the blooming same way. Horsefly bites are awful. They're really bad. They just swell up an itch. I can get bit from anything, and it doesn't bother me, but a horsefly, it looks like a grow breast on wherever it's bit.
Mm-hmm.
And they look like hornets.
Where I live, I'm right on a river, and we get them every once in a while. And it's like, it's a whole ordeal. You see one, and you'll just see everyone just panics. Where's the fly swatter? Let's get the heck out of here. People will dive into the water to avoid them. Because like you said, you get bit, you're going to lose a chunk of flesh. Like,
so what we're saying is it goes for the flesh, whereas the mosquitoes go for your blood.
Right.
Well, yeah, Artemis or Thea right here, the winged Artemis we're talking about. And they found other images of her that deal with whips as well, iconography, and it deals in Pompeii. It's called the Villa of Mysteries. Let's go to the next pic. And these are the frescoes, and we'll unpack some of the frescoes there in Pompeii. Here's one where the satire-like lady is nursing a goat.
That's so Dionysian, it hurts.
And so the frescoes at this Pompeian villa, that's called the Villa of Mysteries, it shows a bride that goes through this series of frescoes through an initiation. And at the end, she's enthroned in a chair as like the mother or the bride's the mother or whatever you call her. She's the crone, the older lady, and she starts off as the virgin and goes through this series of initiations. And in the initiation, she's being whipped in different images. So let's go to the next picture. So I threw this in there just to show you real quick. This is a Cuban nurse goat, how they're feeding the baby with the goat's milk directly. Because we've talked about that. There's Hydra, there's Zeus, there's all these different myths. Dionysus, everything doing with goats and milks, and it's a thing. You could take it. So imagine they fed these goats whatever they wanted, and it could transmute and make that bioavailable for us to intake. And that could be cannabis, poppies, psychoactives, whatever. And it'll process out the bad alkaloids and give you the good stuff, let's say. So I just want to throw that in there real quick just to show you a little lactognosis. So go to the next pic. And so here's another fresco. And so you'll see the lady on the right is holding a thyrsus. And the thyrsus, the tip of it is dipped in honey. And she's whipping the bride right there that's going through the initiation. And the bride is in a purple robe. That's part of the process. They put her in purple robes. And then they whip her with the thyrsus while they're doing this rituals. And then we'll go to the next image. Boom, right here. And this is her completing part of the process. She's on the ground right here. And you'll see the lady to the right is Artemis or Thea, the winged Artemis, wearing purple as well. And in between them, you'll see that's like a purple top. It's hollow, but it's like spinning. I don't know if you could see that and notice that.
Strophalon. That's the Strophalon of Hecate. Okay, this is really important for the magic rites and for all what we're talking about with the whip. So on one hand, this is a kid's game. So you'll see people, you'll see it. It's like a top that literally has a rope on it that you pull, and then you can take the whip and you can crack it. And if you're good, you can keep the top spinning. And it's a game where you try to keep whipping to keep the top going and don't allow the top to fall. And it stays up via the whips, right? This is a very, very, very important image throughout the Greek mysteries.
The Jews still somewhat have that in the dreidel. Do you know the dreidel, that little spinning top?
Right.
In fact, you see that as we're talking about all these things on the front of the chariot card of the tarot. Often there'll be a little shield on the front and a little dreidel. It's all the earth spinning and pole star. What I want to say about this is it's always inviting you to that null place. I say this almost every episode, but the idea of the pole is that there's a point at the top, or the pole itself doesn't move. It's like a wheel with a hub, and you're invited to go to that place where nothing moves. Some people call it the ionic realm. Some people just call it deep transcendental meditation. It's got all these different analogies, but it's always something spinning around the pole, and that pole itself, or the center of the pole, doesn't move. Just as you need to transcend thought, everything else, to get to this place where there's nothing there. There's reasons for that, and maybe we'll go into that in a future episode. But as I see it, that's what it is. I also would let me, before Dion carries on, this two-legged posture, especially if you got wings, is a pole. You know, two legs as one. Jesus does it. Lots of characters do it. It's somewhat this pole idea, and it's somewhat a mushroom to me. In fact, if you look at her legs there, they look mushroomy.
Before we go on, I just want to add, so you mentioned the chariot card, and this is really important because in the center of the chariot card is the Strophalon of Hecate. And we know for sure because Aleister Crowley calls it the lapis lazuli. And the lapis lazuli is what was used to make the Strophalon, and it is the blue and red spinning disc that is whipped. And this is hugely important imagery for the chariot of the sun, right? The chariot chases after the Strophalon, right? That is the fascination.
I'll give it away. Can I give it away?
Yes.
Because if any, I'll give it away through a different language. In China, they call it the lower dantian, and that's as far as deeply as I've studied this. In the West, we call it the Holy Grail. How's about that? And we know that the knight in the Crawley card on that chariot, that dish he's carrying is the Holy Grail. And I can show you on other chariot cards. We'll show you the Sacrum. And it's we'll get into this in a future episode.
And also, I know you would appreciate if you notice the lady that's kneeling, the bride, her left hand is on top of the top, showing you where the access point is, as well as she's holding a pole that's at an angle. So wherever we have access with the pole coming off, we know that it can deal with the precession of equinox, these different angles that deal with the elliptical orbits. I know you unpack that in a lot of the videos that you're on.
Yeah.
You know, there's
she's
just
also
so much
pointing. She's also pointing at the area I was just talking about, that lower Dantian. Basically, his center of gravity. That's what a top's doing. It's spinning about and giving it, it's stabilizing itself around the center of gravity. And that position, they say 3 fingers under the belly button, is your center of gravity.
It's really important here. We're seeing that she's spinning the top, and then the angel is imitating this through the art of dancing in ballet, and that's signified by these specific hand movements. She is in the act of spinning. Okay, and this is what they would do in the Sufi and in the Dionysiac dances. They would wear these really important large skirts. They still survives in the Sufi, right? They wear these big skirts. They'd let their hair down, and they would spin around and around and around while holding their hands like this. Yeah,
and they put the head off to one side, as if there's an angle going on there. It's all, as Dion was saying, it's all this pole stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great image, Dion. How much this is invoked.
Oh, yeah. And this is a special taste. The whole H fresco goes through a whole initiation ritual. And like I said, the winged Artemis, she's holding a whip right there, whipping that top. Go to the next pick.
But so by the way, was that from Pompeii?
Yeah, that's from Pompeii, the Villa of the Mysteries. Yeah. And then by
the end, you got the game I was telling. Yeah.
And you can whip it, and you can keep that top going. And several authors posit that those frescoes in Pompeii deal with the children's game, Oistress, Dionysic Bacchic initiation, the purple. It's all in there. There's a lot of weird stuff. Yeah. Artemis Orthia. There's satires. There's the act of animals and humans swapping fluids. There's a lot to unpack. And here's that game right there. That silly game of the spinning top where you whip it and keep it going. Psh, psh. So yeah, let's hit the next pick. Right there in Africa, where I've been there, where they do that. The Zongbeto. It almost looks like a mushroom too. It's red and white. Notice the guy on the right, he's wearing red and white as well. And they got their yellow colors on because the Zongbeto wears. And they whip that thing to keep it, because it spins. And people will say there's nothing in there. It's a voodoo rituals they do in Benin. And they got to have those whips to keep it from going crazy. Once you create the spinning, you got to keep it in order, let's say.
Well, I'll ask, symbolically from cartoons and such, what color is the North Pole? What color is the North Pole? It's red and white striped.
Right.
In like a barber's pole.
That's
spinning around.
Spinning around, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And the barber pole, that's deep medicine, right? Because the barber would be where you went to get your surgery. And so that pole originally was something they would put the bloody rags on there, and they would spin it around to signify that that's where you went to get healed.
Well, yeah, bloodletting. Bloodletting was what barbers did originally. They didn't give you haircuts. They would do little slits to bleed it. They thought that getting rid of the negative energy through the blood, but it also would dehydrate you and get rid of your blood, your vital essence. And they'd also put tumors. Yeah. And then they'd also put herbs and different oils and psychoactives back into your cuts, because then it could go straight into your bloodstream. So the spinning top and controlling it. And this is Zongbeto. They were a form of voodoo police in West Africa, night spirits that would patrol and protect the communities. And there's underneath, like I said, if you were to lift it up, you would see nothing under there. There's all these, you could type them in on YouTube and see them spin around, and are they lifted up and there'll be animals underneath there or different things will happen. They'll float in the air, whatever. It is what it is.
It's a spirit in there. There's no one in there. If you look in there, you will not find anyone. But yeah, we'll leave it at that.
And well, the way that some people say they do it, they're sewn into the side of the fabric. And so they're spinning, they're standing in place spinning. It's a certain thing. You'll have to watch it to understand and see what they are. But it's a special phenomena that deals with the spinning oisterous energy that needs to be controlled through a whip. That's channeling a God energy into the third dimensional earth plane. So let's hit the next picture. Yeah, I want to show you this one, a special one, the Kalatisos ritual. And it's based on that hat. And it's hard to find anything, any information on this ritual right here. You can see the dress or the skirt is open because they're spinning. And the ritual is based off the name of the hat, meaning good, something to be in a good state.
Good
and
counsel.
It's almost like a whirling dervish.
Yeah.
And the hat has trinkets on it and lights up when it spins like a charger, like a halo. We've been talking about heads and chargers and prophecy and how it comes to life. Well, here's a special darvish or dervish dance, Sufi style. Ancient the Kalatiskos. They're just spinning and the controlling of spinning. So yeah, let's hit the next pic.
Well, it reminds me of my friend's daughter, and we were talking about like how kids are a bit crazy and that, and we were saying like one of the first things that children do, and she did this about 2 days later.
Yeah.
To get off the head. Sorry, that's an Englishism. To feel different is to spin around. Little kids just spin around because it makes them dizzy and
they
get in an altered state of mind. Yeah,
and you laugh.
It's fun to them.
Yeah,
I mean, I hate it, but yeah, I can remember doing it when I was a kid because it felt funny.
And then you grow up and go to amusement parks and go on roller coasters that spin you round and round to recreate that same velocity that the Earth has. I mean, unless you're a flat earther, other than that, we think the Earth's spinning around and we have a certain velocity or pressure, force, whatever it is. So here's another pic. We'll bring it home with the Jesus and the whipping. This is the flagellanta fraternities in Rome and through Europe. And even the Franciscans, different orders would whip themselves and do parades in public. And they would also put little spikes and bind themselves. It's like Marquis de Sade. It's masochism. But they would get into these ecstatic states by whipping themselves and recreating Jesus being whipped in the Bible is one of them. But also they're into the feeling of the stuff that's going on, all the chemicals that's released in the body.
We have to remind ourselves that, it's only within the Christian and modern religious context that sex and drugs have been removed from religious ecstatic rites. These do the same things, right? You can abstain and torture yourself and your body and get there that way, or you can do it through sex and drugs and get there that way. It's and you'll see this in many different cultures, and it's still even encoded in the Christian rites. It's just buried.
And that hedonism, hedon. Well, because remember we were talking about earlier, Psyche gets whipped by sorrow, and which one? Regret or sorrow? It's one of them. Because Aphrodite's pissed because she's too good looking. Well, she ends up marrying Eros, Cupid, and their daughter is Hedon, the goddess of pleasure.
Is that where we get hedonism from?
Yeah, yep. We're all interconnected here. And so this whipping stuff right here we're talking about. And another thing I didn't tell you earlier is that two different things could be happening as well with the whips. We could put herbs and oils and grease and different stuff, natural psychoactives onto the whip. And as you're whipping the body, it's going into the bloodstream. And then the adrenaline speeding it up and getting it faster into the bloodstream so it can process. Or you can put the stuff on the skin, and it's like a basting a turkey or something, let's say. It's just getting it into the protein, into the meat. It's part of the rituals here. Let's hit the next pic. All right, so here's Jesus when he's being whipped. Now, I should unpack it and go back at least 24 hours before, or 48. If I went back 48 hours, we'd have John stealing a donkey. That's a big part of it. Hey, go steal me a donkey to fulfill this kind of set kind of rituals. And then they have a Last Supper. And the Last Supper does involve maybe psychoactives, the dream fish, bloods and semens and wines. And even the bread, he forces Judas to eat this weird bread. It can be ergotized. Then they go upstairs and do some stuff with the young disciples. Just in the version of the Bible, you could read this stuff. But then they go to a garden, tells them, hey, keep watch for me. Don't go and fall into temptation. I got to do something with the little homie who follows me around. And what happens is the legion comes up, he cuts off the dude's ear, Malchus, whose ear gets healed. You know, like somebody else's ear just got miraculously healed. And Malchus means the new king or whatever, and a judge, ruler. And so, yeah, hold your ear, huh? And then the next thing you know, goes to the garden. He gets caught, the little boy with the medicated Sindon cloth. You know, and another thing I didn't tell you, those kind of cloths or Sindons, or girdles, are also part of the Zoroastrian ritual. Besides making milkshakes, they have this sacred cord or cloth or girdle they wear. And they have to untie it and tie it twice a day, Zoroastrians. And they whip it like in the different directions, and that's to get rid of Ahriman, the bad spirit, just to throw that out there. So he gets caught right here. Emmanuel gets caught in the garden, the little boy. They arrest him, take him to court. The beloved John gets to go to court because he's a friend with the high priest. So he's in there and he notices, hey, they put the purple robes on him. Just like in the ritual fresco at the Villa of Mysteries, they put the purple robes on the bridesmaid and bridegroom. Remember, we got a bridesmaid and bridegroom here. Because with fluids in the water of life. And so he gives them a choice. The pirate, Barabbas. But even before that, they take him to get whipped. You know, let's talk about getting whipped. So when they take Jesus to get whipped, they tie him to a column. They just don't whip him in any way. He has to be tied to this special column. And the type of whipping he gets is a paidoisoi. Paidon meaning kid. And what Pontius Pilate or Herod and Pilate say is he needs to be paidoisoi. It means to be taught a lesson, but the kind of lesson you teach a kid. It's in the root of the word. It's how you teach kids, how you whip kids. Part of the rituals we've been showing you for the past hour, the rituals of whipping kids. That's what is prescribed for him. Since he's been naughty, well, he needs to be taught the whipping of a child. And he's tied to a column. And then there's this one mystic. I used one mystic for this one. Her name is Anne Catherine Emmerich, German mystic, 1800s, 1700s. And she had visions. And she used to take morning glory, and she had the stigmata. She's one of those females that had stigmata. And the church used to challenge her stigmata. But her visions was of the whipping. And she said, so part of the whipping, the Romans didn't want to whip them. The soldiers, they were too good to do that. So they had these slaves whip them. And they were drinking and having like a Dionysic ritual with these fashioned cords and whips and ropes dancing around them, whipping Jesus in a Dionysic fashion. And in part of these different grimoires and in different versions, as well as her version, Mary or the disciples collect the blood of Jesus after he's being whipped. And even in the last temptation of Christ, or the Passion of Christ, the one with Mel Gibson, Mary cleans him off with the blood and collects that blood, that sacred blood, to be used as part of a ritual. Some people call it the tears of Osiris. Remember, it's the fluids that are generated during the whipping with the oestrus are psychoactive. And we're already been talking about in past videos that he's on psychoactives at this point, and they want to collect his fluids as well. And so let's go to the next pick.
Can I just add there before we move on that
by all means.
We spoke a moment ago about the North Pole being red and white stripes. Obviously, is attached to a column. What's the image of somebody's getting whipped? Usually, it's the back. And what's that? If it's a white person, which Jesus is Caucasoid, it's got red stripes all the way up it. So it's just something that came to mind. I'm not sure if that means anything, but
I think you're onto something with the people who are striking him are red panted, and he's in a white pant, like a white whatever Sindon.
Now, mind you, that's in one version. But remember, he went to court right before this. And what was he wearing in that courtroom?
Purple robes.
Right. They put a purple robe on him on purpose. And that is identified in the literature. And it's a part of it. So he should be wearing a purple robe right there. They just put him in a white robe for this version. Now let's go to the next picture. So Tears of Osiris, and it's part of a version of it. His blood is activated and being collected as a form of Tears of Osiris. And Tears of Osiris has multiple meanings. It can mean a balm in ancient Egypt. And so at this point, we'll get into I'll explain a little bit about the Ketoret, which is the temple incense in Judaism that they would burn inside the sacred temple, the Holy of Holies, and get high from. They would have visions. And it had the murex, mollusk shells in it as part of the ingredient. It's called oncha, galbanum, another ingredient. It was said to have a balm in it. And some people call it the balm of Gilead. Other people posited that it's a special mastic from an island called Chios, a Greek island. And then the other version of people will say it is from a Cretan. It's Crete, and that's cistus. But first we'll get into the mastic, which is a resin that's collected from a tree. And that's the pistachia tree. And it only grows in that part of the world. And it does grow in northern Iraq as well. I don't know, it's Snappy smiling. You want to say something about this?
just wild stuff, because what is the Greek word for whip? Mastikos, right? Yeah. And we know that they are collecting the mastic, and it's this type of chewing gum that they're constantly chewing upon. And we know it's a base for drugs.
Oh, yeah.
Know? And this has to go back, like you were saying, with these rites of Osiris, the goat beard, the collecting of the sacred resins. And also it's a wand. It's a type of plant, right? Like it's wild.
We'll go to the next pic, and I'll break down that ritual. All right, so there's that whip right there. And some people call it the Argostiri or the Landesterion. And they would collect labdanum or lindenum. And what it is, different versions. So with the one on the island of Chistos, that version they're collecting there, the pistachio plant, that mastic would dry into tears. It would fall like onto pitas. And they would collect tears. It's almost like little blood tears. And most of it shipped to the Middle East, not even used in Greece. 90% of it goes to Arabic countries, where it's used as part of incense and foods. But when we're talking about, we got another version, which is the one used on the island of Crete, which is rock rose, cistus. And this is another balm. And what happens is, originally, the way they would do it, they would have their goat go into the fields, and the goats would graze, and their beards would collect the resin. They would come back and comb out the resin and collect this like a hash-looking product. And then another technique is they created a whip with these leather thongs, goat thongs, and then they would just whip the plants and then get the resin off the whip. Now, there's different authors that posit that this is one of the reasons that the pharaohs have the flail, because this is a sacred balm to the pharaohs, and in these rituals, and in the temple incense. And that's a flail right there of King Tut's. And it's also a sign of control and keeping the cattle in line. It's a form of rulership, let's say. Go to the next pic. Right there, and there's the beard. So the goats would collect it, and sometimes they would just cut off the goat beard, braid it, and attach it to the pharaoh. The fake beards that the pharaohs would wear, male or female, was a sign of the goat in the rock rose plant, the cistus. And so it's part of this balm, this special Tears of Osiris balm that's used in these temple incense and sacred ancient drinks and rituals. It's edible, it smokes, it smells. You could be adorned with it, anointed with it, you know.
Beautiful. I love it.
Oh, maybe I got one more pick. Yeah, here you go. That's the Anthony of the Order of Artemis. And this is a modern whip in the Ralph Harvey had this, which is the Order of Artemis, beginning of the Fellowship of Isis, and the Wiccan covens, and Gerald Gardner and Cardell and all these guys. Here's one of the Witchcraft Museum there in England, is a whip that the Order of Artemis that the head had. And it's funny because she's related to German nobility, the Order of Draco, this Order of the Dragon. We'll talk about that in another episode. That's why I wanted to throw that in there, just to plant seeds for a future episode that deals with Wicca and stuff in England and different orders and whips.
Beautiful. Yeah, those witch wars get so wild with the Wicca stuff. And I know that the Temple of Artemis is deeply connected to these Roman rites. What was the guy calling himself? I can't remember, but it's a word for like someone.
Diana Lucifera. That was Rex Nemorensis, and that was the enemy of this cult. Like they had competing cults, and that guy was part of the source material for J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter. And his place was called Dumblecot and Dumbledine, and had a big D on it, and he had a magic company, and he battled Gerald Gardner and the like, and ended up living in his caravan. That's an RV in his field. This old dude with white hair, and he was the magician. It'll be fun. We'll get into it.
That's wild. Are you familiar with any of that kind of Wiccan War stuff, Ryan?
I am, but the history is one thing, and I think to find certain things out, you need to delve into the history. But for me personally, I've always been trying to find out what it is, not what went on, but what it is. Like what is magic in all its little facets? What is it? Not what were people doing with it? So yes, I do know something of it, but if you want me to come on and talk about it, I will dive so deeply into it, I will come out the other end smelling of it.
You have access to the sources and to the geography, so you should definitely dig.
And I'm from here, yeah.
Right. It's your history. But yeah, that was a beautiful presentation, Dion.
Really good, mate. Really good.
Before I hop into mine, do you have any comments, Ryan?
I thought that I found you guys out many months ago, maybe a year or so ago now, and it was my favorite way to spend a Sunday, because as many points as I'd know, there'd be as many points as I didn't know, and the points that I didn't know outweighed the points I knew this time. Fantastic, Dion. You always do a great job, mate. I love it.
Beautiful. All right, that's so much fun. So I assembled a bunch of sources that I want to talk about to really dig into this idea of the myth and around the whip. So first I want to talk about Apollo and Hermes and the stealing of the whip and the gaining of the caduceus by Hermes. So this comes to us from the Homeric hymn to Hermes. And I'll just read it for you guys. It goes, "Then Hermes answered him with artful words. You question me carefully, O far worker, yet I am not jealous that you should enter upon my art. This day you shall know it, for I seek to be friendly with you both in thought and word. Now you know well all things in your heart, since you sit foremost among the deathless gods, O son of Zeus, and are goodly and strong, and why Zeus loves you all right is, and has given you splendid gifts. And they say that from the utterance of Zeus, you have learned both the honors due the gods, O far worker, and oracles from Zeus, even all his ordinances. Of these I myself have already learned that you have great wealth. Now you are free to learn whatever you please. But since, as it seems, your heart is so strongly set on playing the lyre, chant and play upon it, and give yourself to merriment, taking this as a gift from me. And do you, my friend, bestow glory on me. Sing well with this clear-voiced companion in your hands, for you are skilled in good, well-ordered utterance. From now on, bring it confidently to the rich feast and lovely dance and glorious revel, a joy by night and by day. Whoso with wit and wisdom inquires of it cunningly, him it teaches through his sound all matter of things that delight the mind, being easily played with gentle familiarities, for it abhors toilsome drudgery. But those who sow in ignorance inquires of it violently, to him it chatters mere vanity and foolishness. But you are able to learn whatever you please. So then I will give you this lyre, glorious son of Zeus. What I, for my part, will graze down with wild roving cattle the pastures on hill and horse feeding plain. So shall the cows covered by the bulls calve abundantly, both males and females. Now there is no need for you, bargainer, though you are to be furiously angry. When Hermes had said this, he held out the lyre, and Phoebus Apollo took it and readily put his shining whip in Hermes' hand and ordered him keeper of herds. Son of Maia received it joyfully, while the glorious son of Leto, the Lord far worker Apollo, took the lyre upon his left arm and tried each string with the key. Awesomely it sounded at the touch of the god, while he sang sweetly to its note. Okay, so there's so much going on here. It's important that we understand who Hermes is, okay? Hermes is the magician. Hermes is the one who moves between worlds. He's divine and human. This is a story about how you gain magical power. Helios Apollo has the power of persuasion. He controls the cattle. He drives the car, right? He holds the whip and commands the reins. How does Hermes gain the whip? By wooing him through magical creation and art, and by giving him the ability to create and play music, by inspiring him. And they do a trade. There's just so much going on here. This also connects to later myths that we'll see with the devil and inspiring musicians, right? What does the devil do? He gives you the power of fame and persuasion. He doesn't give you skill. This is the myth, right? Or this is where people mess it up. They think the devil gives you skill. No, you go to the crossroad because you are skillful and you show your skill to the devil. And if you can impress the devil, he will give you the power of persuasion. That whip is not just the whip. It's the caduceus. Right? It's the staff with the twin serpents. It can be a whip, or it can be the phallus, or the magic wand, right? Lots of stuff going on. What do you guys think of this?
The spine thing is going on in there as well. I mean, it's interesting, that crossover between the Christian version of the devil and Hermes. It happens. I mean, we've already discussed Hermes at the crossroads, and that you take that path. You know, that's why you meet the devil at the crossroads too, because you've got that decision to make. You could also say you kind of meet the good God at the crossroads as well, because that's the good path. But people tend to say the devil because there's that link between Hermes and the devil. Jung does it as well. The Hermes, the Mercury, is somewhat the devil. He calls him the little devil. It's because look, Hermes. The reason why Hermes gets into that situation with Apollo in the first place is because when he was a baby, he steals his cattle, because Hermes has an appetite. He wants, and he steals the cattle, and he eats a few of them, and so he gets carted off to his dad with Apollo, and Zeus is like, Hermes stole my cattle, and Hermes is a liar. He fibs. He's the communicator. He's the god that bridges the two things, the two poles. That's what that whip is. That's what the caduceus is. It's the willpower. It's the same as his penis. It's the willpower that can bind those two poles together, the two opposites. The two snakes come together in love that were warring around that pole, around that central spine phallus. There's lots of myths. Again, I keep talking about it today, but it actually all goes back to internal stuff, and is a lot like it's all down to that. The spine. How can I put this easily? And you see the Chinese guys doing all the slow qigong stuff. Well, all that is focused on nerve endings and certain areas of the body and internal meditation. You could take it to India, and there's Kundalini stuff going on there. In Europe, it was alchemy. Hermes is the god of alchemy. It's all, as much as it's external, it's internal, because amazing things can be done with your body.
Right.
That's
But
what
it's
I'm gonna
important
say.
too that we understand here that the real power of Hermes, you said it, he's the thief. He gains the power of persuasion and communication from Apollo. And it's an exchange. There's also another level to this myth. It's about compromise and about overcoming a situation. Apollo keeps having his cattle stolen. The problem is Hermes is stealing the cattle, right? He also wants beauty. Hermes has the lyre. Hermes can create that music that Apollo can't. So they come to this agreement. Hermes gets to have some of the cattle, but he also now guards the cattle. He protects the cattle from other thieves. You've overcome that conflict, right? You're now merging these two things together. Again, it's this harmony that's representative in the caduceus. You have the twin serpents, right?
The lyre and the caduceus, the stroke whip, are interchangeable. I mean, the lyre has 7 strings.
Yeah.
The caduceus has 7 crossings where the 2 snakes bind. Those are the 7 planets, or the 7 chakra. They're all these archetypal analogies that go from the external world into the internal world.
Right. And also what we're getting at too is that Lucifer, Apollo Helios, he gives you what you want. He gives you the flame. He teaches you how to draw down the stars. So of course, if you can prove that you're skillful, he will give you the caduceus. Hermes proved himself by stealing the cattle. You have to, and by producing the lyre. You have to rise to the occasion with Lucifer. What do you think, Dion?
I agree 100%. In some of the different research I was doing for this episode, the whip was a metaphor for your soul, for the Holy Spirit. So I could see that's what you have to trade to the devil to get persuasion. He wants your soul, your power, your willpower, your soul. And then you'll get persuasion. You'll get
Why do
beauty.
you think, all these metaphors aside, what do you guys see that as? What do you see this bargain as? Where, like Robert Johnson, for example, he was said to sell his soul for obviously for him, in antithesis to what Snappy said, it was the power to play the guitar. But you're saying it was the actual fame from playing it. What is really going on here, do you think?
So, okay. If you really want to explore this, you got to look into someone like Jimi Hendrix. He'll lay it down for you clearly. There's 2 songs where you can see it, Voodoo Child and The Wind Cries Mary. Part of it is you're cursed, right? Part of it is a curse of Fortuna. But also at the same time, it is about, right? Any artist sells their soul, number one. This is a misconception and it's Christian bullshit. To be an artist is to sell your art. It's to give up yourself. To create true art is to create of the self. So all artists are selling their souls. Lucifer's not buying anything. What he's giving you is he's giving you what you ask for, which is fame. The problem here is fame. Fame is a very dangerous 2-edged sword. Fame is that power of Babylon, of Aphrodite, and it's always 2-sided, force and love. And people don't recognize what it is to be turned into a star. To become that star is to be loved and hated in equal measure. And it is also, if you draw down the star and you want to have that fame, the cost may be your life. It may be you need to be set ablaze like the bright Virago. This is a thing that happens. The virgin is set afire, but then she transforms into a star, right? In order to become famous, in order to become a god, Hercules is drugged, strapped to a pyre, and burned alive. The fame kills him, but it also transcends him to the stars, right? This is what Jimi Hendrix does to himself, and he'll tell you it plainly in his music. He invoked that power to transform the world, to become the dragon, and to speak voice, right? But to do so, he had to burn himself out. He blew up in a blaze of glory, and it happened his 27th year at his Saturn, his Saturn conjunction. right?
Yeah. I mean, I earlier in life, when I was a musician, I had a little brush with fame. I mean, we've all got, we all have a little taste of it now just by being on YouTube. But
Right.
I did get that. And to be honest, I remember once or twice, and I would love to apologize to these people. Some people turned up from earlier in my life and seemed different with me now. And I was a bit rude with them because it was difficult to deal with. And I'd love to apologize to them now. I was only a little bit rude. Being English, that's hardly any rudeness at all. But but it was definitely annoying. It was like, people think they know you because they've seen you, but you've not seen them. They think you kind of A, they think they know you, and B, they think you owe them a little slice of something. I don't know why. Because people are silly, really. A lot of people don't think, or they go, "Oh, look at that person. I can just go and talk to them." Because you're out on public display, basically, you've put yourself out there. Yeah, it wasn't. Everyone would like fame, but nobody would like fame. It's weird. You have to shelter yourself from it. I think the only people that survive do that.
Right. Yeah. No. There's oftentimes success is its greatest danger. Right. And all of us here, actually, Dion has had musical fame. I've had musical fame. And I've talked about this before. I did magic in order to get fame and then flipped the F out. I made it on the Tonight Show and it was awful. It was awful. It was not what I wanted, what I thought I wanted. And I had to go through that. Well,
if you don't mind.
I was not prepared for it, and the anxiety that it brought me and the demands that it placed upon me and the people that come, like you were saying, there's a sort of lecherousness that is driven when, as soon as you get fame, everyone wants to speak for you, speak about you, talk to you, claim you. And also it's like with me, I'm doing something novel, right? Something that people don't understand. They see, oh, he's snapping his fingers. It's stupid. How dare you be famous? Fuck you. I literally got that response from people. I was living in Toronto at the time. It blew up on the front page of Reddit. It didn't last for long, but there was a week.
Yeah.
People come up to me in the street, want my picture. Another person comes up to me in the street swearing at me. It's like, whoa. Whoa, I was so glad when it was over, to be honest.
Yeah.
And then my whole life was kind of reacting to it, where it was like, do I want it? Do I not? Do I want it? Do I not? Where I always had half of myself committed and half of myself not committed, where I would make money, but it's like fame is just, it feels so gross. And you feel like you feel like you're selling your soul,
Well, you are. Like you said, you are selling your soul.
Like Dion, you got to play with the birds. You've had some of this too. What's your perspective?
Did you say the birds?
Yeah, wasn't it the birds?
Play with the birds.
No, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Sorry, Peter, Paul, and Mary. That's what I mean. Sorry.
Yeah, that'd be my biggest performance, like 20, 30,000 people. The stage was so big that the musicians were all like 10, 20 feet apart from each other. That's how big it is. And I jammed out that day with Richie Havens, and it was one of the best times of my life, and I played for Puff the Magic Dragon, and the audience was in a trance, moving their hands with lighters and singing along, and it was like a religious experience. At that time, I wasn't into Peter, Paul, and Mary. That was a different generation. I was there for something else, performing, and then I jammed with Richie Havens. He says, "Hey, let me introduce you to these people. You should jam with them." And then I end up on the big stage, and very wild stuff. But the religious intensity of people singing along with all the lyrics and crying and waving their hands back and forth, I was like, "Wow, this is wild."
What instrument did you play, Dion? Something tells me bass guitar or rhythm.
No. I play the congas.
Oh, cool.
Tambores africano. I specialize in tribal percussion. I've lived in Africa, the Amazon, traveled to different countries, and ethnomusicology. And it's how to bring out the oestrus through sound, through rhythm, through hitting these animal skins and whipping them.
That's how Dion and I first started chatting, largely because we're both percussionists. One of the big
Oh, not
things.
whips.
No whips.
I have those too, though.
All right, so now I want to jump to the other side of this image. We've talked about Apollo and Hermes. We're now going to talk about Aphrodite. So this comes to us from Pindar in the Pythian Odes. It says, and the queen of sharpest arrows brought the dappled wryneck from Olympus, bound the four spokes of the indissoluble wheel. Aphrodite of Cyprus brought the maddening bird to men for the first time, and she taught the son of Aeson skill in prayerful incantations, so that he could rob Medea of reverence for her parents, and a longing for Greece would lash her, her mind on fire, the whip of persuasion. Right? And it's connected to this idea of the spinning wheel of fortune, right? Which is also the star, which is also the sun, and Aphrodite. And to the story of Medea, right? Medea is that muse that was Jason was chasing after. And he was able to lash her with the whip, right? And it's
so much in there. That's so condensed. That's
right?
Amazing.
You gotta love Pindar. Pindar is so wild. And the whip of persuasion, the word they use for persuasion is Pytho, which is a daimon, which is the daughter of Aphrodite. Okay.
That's Hermes' wife.
Yes, Hermes' wife. And I want to get into this. Sappho says Pytho was the daughter of Aphrodite. Okay. And then Alcman, another one of these great poets.
Can I stop you real quick? If you're the daughter of Aphrodite, you're the whip of Aphrodite?
Apparently. The daughter of Aphrodite is persuasion. It's her voice, right? And here we got Tyche, Fortuna, sister of Eumonia, which you were talking about, good order. That's what that crown is about, bringing good order, the other one. And Pytho, the daughter of Prometheus. Who does Aphrodite have persuasion with? Prometheus, Lucifer, Apollo, Helios. Okay. And then I want to get into this. This word links or ainges is connected to the spinning top, right? This is one of the terms they use for the spinning top. So the lynx, a nymph of magic love charm, was the daughter of Echo, some say, and of Pytho. The daughter of persuasion is the fascination, is the magical charm that causes us to fall into descent. Okay? Keep all this in mind as we continue here. Now I want to read you a few passages from Virgil's The Aeneid. The first one, we're going to talk about one of the Furies, Tisiphone, or Tisiphone. Sorry, these words are so hard, right? So let me read this for you. And her feet of their own accord mounted the swift chariot, and with one hand she took the reins, and the other the whip of cunning workmanship to drive the mules. And they rushed hasting into the city and the palace. A gate fronts it, vast with pillars of solid steel that no human force, not the heavenly gods themselves, can overturn by war. An iron tower rises into the air, and seated before it is Tisiphone, clothed in a blood-wet dress, keeps guard of the doorway. Sleeplessly, night and day, groans came from there, and the cruel sound of the lash, when the clank of iron and dragon chains. Tisiphone, the avenger, armed with her whip, leaps on the guilty, immediately lashes them, and threatening them with the fierce snakes in her left hand, calls to her savage troop of sisters. What do you guys think of Virgil and the whips also being the Furies, like Dion was showing?
I am looking up the etymology of Tisiphone right now.
Okay. But yeah, it gets so intense, eh?
Another thing I'll point out, we didn't mention earlier with Artemis of Ephesus and the Galloway priest, Cybele. were famous for whipping themselves
Yep.
as well. The castrati.
Yep. As part of their madness, they would whip themselves into a frenzy so that they could then push themselves to that point where they would go through the castration, right? And throw their testicles at the doors of women, and who would then come and clothe them in women's clothes, right? That was part of the whole entire thing, you know? And what I wanted to point out here, though, is Tisiphone, she climbs the chariot and she takes the reins, right? This is imagery we always see with the magic. It's about, you have to embody these figures, right? You want to invoke the power of Apollo. You have to engage in the chariot, take hold of the reins and wield the whip, right? And drive the mules, right? And then she is one of the guard dogs, right? In the underworld. She whips the guilty and forces them to suffer and face their sins. You know?
It means murder and retribution is what it means, literally.
Beautiful. Isn't that wild? Let's continue here. So this is a longer one talking about another one of the Furies. Actually, you want to look up the etymology for this? Alecto.
Alllecto. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll read this while you look that up.
I'm glad I see Queen Amata in there, because that came up. That came up in the whipping research.
Right? Okay. And Amata, right? We're getting into mushrooms. Okay. So this is a longer one, so please bear with me. Okay. So Alecto, steeped in the Gorgon's poison, first searches out Latium and the high halls of the Laurentian king, and sits at the silent threshold of Queen Amata, whom concerns and angers have troubled, with a woman's passion concerning the Trojans' arrival and Turnus' marriage. The goddess flings a snake at her from her dark locks, and plunges it into the breast, into her innermost heart, so that, maddened by the creature, she might trouble the whole palace. Sliding between her clothing and her polished breast, it winds itself unfelt and unknown to the frenzied woman, breathing its viperous breath. The powerful snake becomes her twisted necklace of gold, becomes the loop of her long ribbon, knots itself in her hair, and roves, slithering down her limbs. And while at first the sickness, sinking within as liquid venom, pervades her senses and clasps her bones with fire, and before her mind has felt the flame through all its thoughts, she speaks softly and in her mother's unusual manner, weeping greatly over the marriage of her daughter to the Trojan. Oh, have you, her father, no pity for your daughter or yourself? Have you no pity for her mother when the faithless seducer will leave with the first north wind, seeking the deep with the girl as prize? Wasn't it so when Paris, that Phrygian shepherd, entered Sparta and snatched Leda's Helen off to the Trojan cities? What of your sacred pledge? What of your former care for your own people and your right hand given to so often your kinsman Turnus? If a son-in-law from a foreign tribe is sought for the Latins, it's settled, and your father Faunus commands ways on you. Then I must think that every land free of our rule that is distant is foreign, and so the gods declare. And if the first origin of his house are traced, Inachus and Acreus are ancestors of Turnus and Mycenae, his heartland. When thou trying in vain with words, she sees Latinus stand firm against her, and when the snake's maddening venom has seeped deep into her flesh and permeated throughout, then truly the unhappy queen, goaded by monstrous horrors, rages madly, unrestrained through the vast city. As a spinning top, sometimes that boys intent on play thrash in a circle round an empty courtyard, turns under the whirling lash, driven with the whip, it moves in curving tracks, and the childish crowd marvel over it in innocence, gazing at the twirling boxwood, and the blows grant it life. So she is driven through the heart of cities, and proud peoples on a course that is no less swift. Moreover, she runs to the woods, pretending Bacchic possession, setting out on a greater sin and creating a wider frenzy, and hides her daughter among the leafy mountains to rob the Trojans of their wedding and delay the nuptials, shrieking Ao to Bacchus, crying, "You alone are worthy of this virgin. It is for you in truth she lifts the soft thyrsus. She circles in this dance for you. She grows her sacred hair." Rumor travels, and the same frenzy drives all the women, inflamed with madness in their hearts, to seek strange shelter. They leave their homes and bare their head and neck to the winds, while others are already flilling their hair with vibrant howling, carrying vine-wrapped spears and clothed in fawnskins. The wild queen herself brandishes a blazing pine branch in their midst, turning her bloodshot gaze on them, and sings the wedding song for Turnus and her daughter. And suddenly, fierce cries out, "O women of Latium, wherever you are, hear me. If you still have regard for unhappy Amata in your pious hearts, if you're stung with concern for your mother's rights, loose the ties from your hair, join the rites with me." So Alecto drives the queen with Bacchic goad, far and wide through the woods, among the wild creatures' lairs.
Very good. What a great poem that as well. My word. Oh, unceasing anger, Alecto means unceasing anger.
Right? And it is that unceasing anger that drives her spinning with madness through the cities, that drives her to call all the women to madness out into the woods, to engage in the orgies, right? To cry out, Iwa, right?
Ewa, ewa. Yeah.
Right? And we got to remember, it's that whip that pushes. The whip is also a drug, right? It's also the will. It's also Eros himself, the wings of Eros, right?
I saw a dual analogy in there as well, that which you often see, which is the serpent as the drugs and the altered states, but also the serpent as your own hormonal system. And you know, it really, I got angry this week at somebody, and I felt the squirts of hormones inside me. Oh, whoa! See, you know, calm that down. But what, you can't calm it down unless you run away from it into the forest and scream out. You can't calm it down. So it seems like, because it says at the beginning in fake Bacchic, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, she pretends to be possessed, Bacchic possession. Yeah. Pretending Bacchic possession, setting out on a greater sin and creating wider frenzy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's one of these things where it's like, is it real or is it fake? It starts off as fake. You have to induce it upon the self, right? It's like hypnosis. If you're not willing to play along, it will never, the game ends. You know, it's both real and fake, you know?
Yes. And it's the gold. I mean, we said the whip and the gold. Dion showed a picture before of Osiris, two items, the flail and the gold. And it's like one's willpower, and well, they're both signs of willpower. That flail, as you said, it is possibly for the old chinny beard there to take all the terpenes and what other, you know, strange substances are on that goat beard, but also to separate wheat from chaff.
Yep.
That's what it does.
Part. Yeah.
Yeah, and also that hook is to catch goats and all the herd, but more particularly goats. So these are all, you have to have the willpower to sort yourself out. She had to have the will to go and vent. You know, like you said, you might fake it at the beginning, but you get there eventually.
Right.
And a lot of this is will. It without that willpower, humanity is nothing. We're animals still.
Yeah.
With that willpower, we can express these satiristic wants. Like I'm brought back to the goat-headed guy near the beginning, next to the herm. You know, we can either let it out at an appropriate time with willpower. The willpower keeps that goat in for as long as humanly possible, Or we can choose to transform that goat, as Hermes was suggesting in the background, you know, and use that frustration. I got angry this week, like I said, I let it out a little bit, and then I did something with that frustration and with that anger. I transformed it, transmuted it, a nice alchemical word, into something else.
It's all about the middle path, and we're going to find this out. But okay, Helios, Apollo, Lucifer is the center god. He is the middle god. He teaches you how to move between the poles so you don't get burned. And we'll see this is also deep within the Scythian religion. Remember, right? Who is the Buddha? Shakyamuni, the son of the Scythians, that king. And what is his power? His power is the middle way and being able to recognize emotion. Right? The Buddha is not great because he overcomes emotion, but because he sees it arise and he lets it fall. Or he, like you said, uses it to his advantage, you know?
The name for the planet Mercury in India is Buddha.
Right? I didn't even have to bring that up. You knew that one. That's a wild one. I always love to tell people that.
You don't even have to explain it. If you know, you know.
Right? Too funny. All right. I'm going to just deal with one thing here. Okay.
By the way, everybody out there, Mercury is the Latin name for Hermes.
Right. And this comes from Aristophanes' Birds. This is just a funny thing I saw. I'm looking around, and it was just too apt. Oh, woe is me. Why? 'Tis a whip. No. These are the wings, I tell you, that set the top a spinning. Right? What are the wings? The wings are the power of Eros. It's also the birds, the muse, right? We saw that earlier. Aphrodite brings the birds. She gives us the ability to speak, right? Teaches us that reason.
You know, this right here is a metaphor or whatever for the fresco there at Pompeii of why you have Artemis or Thea with wings and a whip, and it deals with in the spinning top. And like I said, there was a whole thesis out there about that, about what's the connection between Artemis with wings, whips, and spinning tops. And you can see right here, it's interconnected.
So interconnected.
Can anyone
you just gotta
actually flip this out though and simplify it, because I'm still struggling here.
I'm going to continue. There's more to this idea of the spinning top too, okay? So this comes from Michael Sellos, is a Byzantine commentator. And he's talking about the magical rites. And specifically, he's talking about the performance of the oracular rites. And he's talking about this item that they used in the oracular rites that is called the strophalone or strophalos of Hecate. And he describes it here. Is a golden sphere with lapis lazuli enclosed in its center, which is spun by means of a leather thong and which is covered with symbols. As it was spun, the Theurgists made their invocations. These spheres were generally called iinges or lynxes, bringing us back to that daimon, the daughter of Pytho, lynx, okay? And could be either spherical or triangular or of some other form. And while they're making their invocations, they emitted inarticulate or animal cries, laughing and whipping the air. So the oracle teaches that it is the motion of the strophalos which works the ritual on account of its ineffable power. It is called of Hecate as consecrated to Hecate. This is as above, so below. This is a manifestation of the black sun. This is Hecate, which is that star that spins. It's the fascination that causes Zagreus to fall, that causes Phanes to fall, right? And it's all about this. And this is about how you bring about that magic. You have to recreate that fascination, that cries, the Iwa, right?
The Bacchic frenzy through spinning. Isn't that what the universe is doing?
That's what the universe
spinning around
is doing.
The sun, and our DNA just spinning, and everything's spinning around. And
so the strophalos is that ultimate point. It's that Saturnian magical point. It's drawing down the star to a specific point in time. You're causing a reflection, right? And let's continue here. This is where we're going to get into some wildness. This comes from Lucan, the Pharsalia. And this is a magical rite to bind Hecate through the power of Helios and to invoke her in this way. And thou too, Hecate, who to the gods in comely shape in mine, not that of Erebus, appearest henceforth, wasted and pallid as thou art in hell, at my command shalt come. I'll noise abroad the banquet that beneath the solid earth holds thee, thou maiden of Enna. But what bond thou lovest night's king? By what mysterious stain infected, so that Ceres fears from hell to call her daughter? And for thee, base king, Titan, shall pierce thy caverns with his rays, and sudden day shall smite thee. Do you hear? Or shall I summon to mine aid that God at whose dread name earth trembles, who can look unflinching on the Gorgon's head and drive the Furies with his scourge, who holds the depths ye cannot fathom, and above whose haunts ye dwell supernal, who by waves of Styx forswears himself unpunished. It is Helios, right? Who can command Hecate, who can drive that top.
Consciousness, attention.
Yeah. And shining a light. What is the light but the gaze, perception, to engage with the world, like you're saying, to take note, right? Beautiful. And then I wanted to come to the last thing that I have for you guys, comes from Ovid's Metamorphosis. And this is Lucifer laying it all out for you, talking about the whip and the reins, and talking about magic and how you can achieve ionic life. So for those with ears to hear, pay attention. This is as clear as I've found so far. All the stars took flight, while Lucifer, the last to quit his vigil, gathered that great host and disappeared from his celestial watch. And when his father Phoebus Titan saw the earth and the wide universe in glowing tints arrayed, as wane the moon's diminished horns far distant, then he bade the nimble Horae to yoke the steeds. The Horae are the ones who spin the seasons, by the way, to yoke the steeds. At once the deities accomplished his commands and led the steeds, ambrosia fed and snorting flames, from out their spacious stalls, and fixed their sounding bits. Then with a hollow drug the father touched the stripling's face, to make him proof against the rapid flame, and wrought him around his hair the sun's rays. If it's important, if it's not enough to engage the rites, you have to engage the rites in the right way, and you have to protect yourself from the fire lest you get burned. The power of fame of God can destroy you, right? But before boding grief, he said, with many a sigh, heaved his anxious breath, if thou canst only heed thy father's voice, by sparing of the whip, and use with nerve the reins, for of their own accord the steeds will hasten. Difficult are they to check in full career. Thou must not drive the car directly through 5 circles, for the track takes a wide curve, obliquely, and is bound by the extreme edge of 3 zones. The 3 zones, that's the seas, the underworld, and the heavens. It avoids the southern pole, and it avoids the bear that roams around the north. The way is plain. The traces of the wheel are manifest. Observe with care that both the earth and sky have their appropriate heat. Drive not too low, nor urge the chariot through the highest plain. For if thy course attain too great a height, thou wilt consume the mansions of the sky. And if too low, the land will scorch with heat. Take thou the middle plain, where all is safe. Nor let the wheel turn over to the right and bear thee to the twisted snake, nor let it take thee to the altar on the left, so close to the earth, but steer the middle course. To fortune I commit thy fate, whose care for thee, so reckless of thyself I pray. While I am speaking humid, night has touched the margin of Hesperian shores. 'Tis not for us to idle, we are called away. When bright aurora shines, the darkness flies. Take up the reins. But if thy stubborn breast be capable of change, use not our car, but heed my counsel while the time permits, and while thy feet are on a solid base, but not according to thy foolish wish, pressing the axle. Rather let me light the world beneath thy safe and wandering gaze. There's so much here to unpack. But before you guys get into it, I just want to say, taking the middle route, taking the reins and not the whip, right? Taking control and taking responsibility, trusting in fate and fortune, and not listening to your will or to your wishes, looking to the light to guide your way. What do you guys have to say?
I like that. All I'll say is the reins instead of the whip.
Obviously there's pole things going on there. We had the chariot itself spinning around. Was it called the chariot or was it the bear?
It's the chariot.
Yeah, the bear
he
of the
said
north.
to avoid the bear of the north. He says to avoid the bear of the north and the fires of the south.
Yeah, well, the bear of the north would be the Ursa Minor in this case, because I'm assuming the chariot they're riding in is Ursa Major, the actual chariot. My word, there's so much in that, Snappy. I thought to myself, how can I read this again? I went, well, I'll put it back on when we finish. That is amazing. That a lot of that was my personal philosophy. You know, I try and stay in the middle and all that stuff. But again, I keep saying it, but there's this internal thing that magicians have. Eliphas Levi called it the astral light, and you've got to soak it in. And it's all linked with the Grail myths and the Grail Maiden. I'll put it like this. Your body is capable of becoming a battery. You see a lot of the crazy woo stuff, and a lot of the place they say the actual magic power is derived from is this astral light. Is qi, they call it in China. I talked about the lower dantian before, and I'm seeing again almost everything we've talked about tonight in my head. I don't know whether it's I'm suddenly obsessing over it or there's something more going on tonight. I mean, the fact we're all wearing yellow is weird as well.
Full moon in Capricorn, and we're talking about Lucifer.
Yeah. Well, let me put it like this. I said the chariot, and you know, on the chariot, we've had chariots all night in whips. And we said that the chariot holds the Holy Grail. When you know on Crowley's card, it's very obvious, and she also holds it on the
right.
Yeah, over that area of the lower dantian. Yeah, he's doing a meditative position and holding it over that same area. This is the storehouse. In China, so it's in the zodiac as well. It's in Virgo, the Grail Maiden. She holds the Grail. She holds a strand of wheat. That's called the house of wheat. A storehouse. You put wheat in the storehouse when you've cut it down. Virgins went and cut it down. Virgin kind of went a working woman that had no husband. So
yeah, young girl.
A storehouse. Right? Yeah, a storehouse is a battery to much of an extent, isn't it? Well, the word qi the word dantian, which means like the lower cauldron kind of thing, the lower, it means elixir field, but it's written with the symbol for wheat because they're getting at a storehouse of wheat. It's these repeating things, and you can see it really pop up explicitly in the Western tradition by about the 1800s when folk like Eliphas Levi are talking about it.
You see a lot of this, like,
that's what I'm seeing.
The parallel in the Indian tradition, of course, is the Kundalini, which Crowley talks about in all of this stuff. And you see this idea, right? It's also in the Caduceus, this idea of the internal spine and the rising of that serpentine energy that comes from the base, from the genitals, right? And you have to manifest that will from your genitals up your spine into your head. And then what does it cause? It causes you to produce that ambrosia that will cause you to see the colors and to get the taste in your mouth. Anyone who's a serious meditator will know what I'm talking about, you know?
Yeah. It's a slightly salty, spermy battery taste, a bit coppery. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice, to be honest. It's weirdly, it's odd, but it's weirdly nice. Not that I go around drinking sperm.
I mean, that's what the soma is, right? That's, you know, and it's also, right, what does Aphrodite produce? What is she born of? She's born of the semen. She's born of the foam, right? And you're churning the oceans to produce the foam, right? It's all these fertility rites. It's about you got to make the universe come.
Well, the Amarit is churned.
Yeah.
And also, Horus and Seth do that thing where they battle with the churning.
Yeah.
Thing, you know, and then somebody ends up with the legs.
That thing that the kind of battling over and churning, it's often said to be the lungs, but if you look at it, it looks like the hips and pelvis again.
Right.
And this is that area. Oh, but look, everybody out there, I'll tell you the simple version of this. The mind, the helios, the concentration, the attention, your consciousness, what you do is you withdraw it. There's a lot of energy that goes into your thought processes. There's a lot of energy that goes into your bodily processes. When you close those down and put not the mind, but the consciousness, the concentration, that helios factor, when you put that in that area I've just been talking about, you'll feel it straight away. It feels like a little hot stone, a little hidden stone. You know what I'm saying? Alchemists. Like a little hot stone inside you. And it happens, I mean, for me, because I'm apparently you got to stretch it all. Because I'm a martial artist, I think it might happen a bit quicker for me. But this is what you do. And you just shut everything off, meditate, put your mind into your body, but particularly in that area, 3 fingers below your belly button, and see what happens. You can do it tonight. If any of you are a bit fitter, a bit stretchier, yoga types, martial artists, athletes, if you do it, you've probably got a bit more of a chance of doing it. So have a go and let us know. Leave a comment. Like, share, and subscribe, Dion?
Leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. Wow, this was such a wild episode. It's going to take me a bit to unpack, but what do you guys have? What are your final thoughts? What do you want to leave our audience with tonight about whips, the magic of whips, and the mythology of whips?
Yeah, your willpower, the whip your life up into shape.
Yeah, whip yourself. Yeah, and take the pain. Get used to the pain. Forgive yourself for whipping yourself. Being alive is so strange and so difficult and so fraught. It's that devil at the crossroads stuff again. Are you gonna listen to the urges of your body, or are you gonna ignore them? Are you gonna ignore them for too long and let them explode on you, or are you gonna let them out at an appropriate time, like those Bacchanites did? You know, everything's a balance. Snappy said the middle path, and I totally agree. But that middle path isn't a path on its own. It's a little from that side and a little from this side. And that's how you find that central path.
Dote and antidote, right? The middle path is about learning to move in flow, learning to transform and take experiences. You got to be like Tiresias, the greatest sage, who was a man, a woman, and a mouse. He went through all of this in order to come to the end, right? And blind and see, could see in the underworld, was blind in the real world, right? You got to go through these transformations. You have to face life and the suffering if you want any growth. I will end it with this, right? You were shown 2 different magical paths tonight, 2 different potentialities. You can take the path of Hermes and command the whip of persuasion. You could bring fame to yourself. But have you found the magic to prevent yourself from being burned? Are you sure you know what you're doing if you're walking that path? Lucifer showed us a different way. There's a different thing. And Lucifer will give you what you ask. You can ask for the reins. You can drive that car. You have to imagine where you're going, though.
Don't be like, what was I want to say Fanny's, but what was his name? It comes in the prelude to the Tale of Atlantis, and he borrows Helios's chariot. It's Helios's son. Can't remember his name. And he says, Dad, like, please, I'm your son. Let me have a go on your chariot. And she's like, it's really scary up there, don't you? It's like, it's not like you can see the pub on the corner and you know where to go, and there's a church over the road and you can find your way. It's like there's a massive lion up there and it's monsters basically. Do you know what you're gonna do? And he's like, he gets all cocky. Yeah, I know what I'm doing, Dad. It's fine. Just give me the reins there. So he gets in the chariot and suddenly everything gets burned and the conflagration happens because he got cocky and cocksure and he didn't know where he was going. He didn't have a plan.
Yeah. That's half of the idea of magic, right? You have to imagine where you're going in the future. You have to see who you are. You have to know the self, right? What are you doing with creating the self into the future? What do you think, Dion?
Yeah. Just don't get burned if you fly too close to the sun.
Right? Don't get burned. Or make sure you have that magic of Medea, right? You better be able to prevent yourself being burned somehow. All right, everyone. This was so much fun. Like and subscribe. What do you have planned for next time, Dion? What's our next topic? You said you had a couple ideas in the works.
Oh, just wait and see. We got some surprises for y'all.
All right. Well, this was amazing. Everyone, make sure you go and subscribe to Ryan Seven. Check out his YouTube channel. Big things in the works with Ryan. He's currently working on his own tarot, and we'll have a Kickstarter out shortly. Any updates on that, Ryan?
Thursday. This Thursday coming, yeah.
So then next week, should we do your Kickstarter?
Do that. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Make a presentation, Ryan, and we'll love to chat with you about your amazing tarot.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys. And thank you, everybody out there actually bothering to watch us, because I'm sure there are other ways you could spend your Sunday. Right? This is a good one, too.
We appreciate y'all. Definitely.
We so appreciate you all. Thanks again. Much love. Take care, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.
Rock and roll.